Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the CWTA monthly webinar focusing on expanding our regional mobility network. We're happy today because the Centralina Regional Council and CATS have come together to put together a vision for the region called Connect Beyond. It's a regional mobility initiative. It's the first regional effort to create a single coordinated transit system that includes multiple transit modes. By attending this presentation, we hope you'll be able to envision real mobility solutions and opportunities that cross 2 states and 12 counties, which includes the entire greater Charlotte region. And the breaking news of the day is that Bob Morgan has accepted a position. Our former chamber executive is about to become the chamber executive for the entire state of South Carolina. He's leaving, I'm forgetting the law firm name,
Robinson Bradshaw.
Robinson Bradshaw, thank you. I'm excited for him. I'm sure this will be a great opportunity for him and a great chance for Charlotte to connect more effectively with South Carolina. We hope to get back to meeting in person soon in the next few months. So I want to urge each and every one of you to get your vaccination shots and look forward to seeing your faces in person. The CWTA mission is to promote, foster, and encourage international commerce success and expand economic growth in the Carolinas region. As a business-driven nonprofit organization, we do this by 4 different things. 1, advocating the interests of business engaged in international trade on local, regional, state, and federal levels, educating businesses and their employees to the issues, policies, and practices within international trade, promoting opportunities for expanding inbound and outbound international commerce, and 4th, celebrating the success of international trade in the region. This discussion is being presented in support of our mission, and we hope you will enjoy the conversation today. We expect this educational informative webinar will demonstrate the expanding assets and the value of this region to international trade. This afternoon, we're joined by Michelle Nance of the Centralina Regional Council and Jason Lawrence of Charlotte Area Transit System. Their presentation will envision real mobility solutions and opportunities across the region. They have an abundance of great maps that will help you see the picture of this mobility network. Our first speaker is Michelle Nance, who has been the Regional Planning Director for the Centralina Regional Council for over 9 years, providing planning services to 9 counties in the greater Charlotte region. And our second is Jason Lawrence. He's had 20 years working with the Charlotte Area Transit System. In 2020, Jason, in partnership with the Centralina Regional Council and with Michelle, began the development of a regional transit vision across this region called Connect Beyond. Both of them are intimately familiar with this initiative and have worked with countless numbers of people across the 12 counties. Let me suggest that if you have any questions during the presentation, that you use the chat box and type your question in there, and I'll raise it at an appropriate time for our speakers to address them. Please keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. And then I want to remind you that immediately following the presentation, we invite you to stay for an additional 30 minutes. I'd like very much, if you choose to stay, to have each of the participants in this, not our speakers, of course, but the participants to get to know each other and learn about your reactions to the presentation so that I can share them with both Jason and Michelle at some time in the future. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and she's got a video and a presentation for us to examine. Michelle, it's all yours.
Well, thank you so much, John. It is quite a pleasure to be here today. So looking forward to, like you said, seeing everybody in person. But again, just really appreciate this group and your interest in all things transit. So I'd like to take a few minutes to go over a little bit of the background about why we even are doing this plan. And then Jason will then talk about some more of the more technical details related to transit and how we are going to be coordinating with transit agencies across the region. So I'll just start by saying, and I know that you guys are very familiar with this, but our region is expected to almost double in population by 2045. And we all know that access to efficient, reliable transportation options are really important to ensure that everybody can benefit. More than half of the people in our region live in one county, but work in another county. And so moving people around, moving the workforce around day to day is really important and will continue to be even post-COVID. And we also know that in order to attract employers and to retain investments within our existing businesses, we have to be able to show that we're making progress toward moving people around to, thinking about the population that we will have, planning for them, and that we're all working together. So another reason for the plan is, we've got 17 transit agencies within the region. So, I mean, just looking at this map and, the volume there, you can really tell that coordination is absolutely critical, especially as we think about our infrastructure investments. There's a limited amount of money for this kind of thing, for transportation in general. And so we've got to make sure we're coordinated on that approach. And frankly, we've got to be coordinated from the rider's perspective. The rider really doesn't care if they're, on one system and transferring to another, or how the money's flowing behind the scenes, or if they're crossing a county line, or, they just don't care. They need to get to a certain place at a certain time. And it's up to us to make sure that they can do so efficiently and seamlessly. So I wanted to put a slide up here that I know, you guys are the experts in this, in logistics. But I just wanted to, put a nod out there to, the fact that we are a national logistics hub because of our location on the East Coast, because of our airport, because of the ports, our access to labor. We know that this sector is not only growing now, but will continue to grow in the future. And we have to be able to look at ways to move people around, reserving capacity for trucking and the logistics and distribution that they do every day. The highway capacity that we have now, and even that we've planned out through 2050, is limited. And so we've got to be more efficient in how we use that. And frankly, transit is one of those options for doing so. And, while a lot of people are working from home now or telecommuting, but we know that our economic growth sectors in this region really require people to be at their jobs on location. So certainly we have a nexus for healthcare in this region, including the veterans hospitals, and they also do a lot of, a range of health and life sciences research. But many of our residents work in manufacturing, and that sector brings in $26 billion to the region. It's been growing over the past 5 years at twice the national average. We know that our employers are going to depend on essential workers to have reliable transportation. So that's a little bit of background about why. So in 2017, the Centralina Regional Council and CATS really started thinking about, we probably should partner together to think about what happens after the CATS 2030 system plan. How does that continue to reach out into the adjoining counties? What does it look like? How can we work together? And we said, yes, that's important, but we really need to better understand what the issues are. So we spent 2 years going around the region, talking to elected officials, major employers, economic development folks, planners, transportation planners, to really understand what are the transportation issues in your area, how might transit be a part of the solution, and frankly, what would having a regional transit plan do for you? How would it help in your process? And we heard a lot of really interesting and great stories. And when we asked the question, how would a transit plan help your community? It was all things from, it'll help us, market our community. It will help us attract investment for jobs, be more coordinated between land use and transportation. And, in a few counties, we also heard, gosh, we don't have a public four-year university, but if we could have access to that through transit connections, that really would, be something else. And then in Anson County, they do not have a medical facility where children can be born. They have to travel outside of the county to go to a hospital facility. And so obviously, for our veterans and folks having kids in Anson County, if you want to do so at a hospital, you got to have some sort of transportation, and transit's critical. So we pulled together a group of partners, funding partners for the plan, including all of the region's transportation planning organizations, the MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations. They do the planning for transportation in their sub-region. And also the two state DOTs, both North Carolina and South Carolina, are involved in this as well. We kicked off this planning effort in February of 2020, about 2 weeks before COVID hit. But we have had to pivot a bit on how we engage the people and the public and stakeholders, but we're moving on ahead. So this slide, I don't want you to focus on the detail other than just to know that we have already since last March done quite a bit of work. But really what I wanted to point out here is this 1928 photo, which was the grand opening of the new bridge crossing the Catawba from Mecklenburg, or I should say from Gaston to Mecklenburg, right? And it's actually known as the World War I Memorial Bridge. And it shows the importance of the transportation infrastructure investments that we make, and that we really have a once in a century chance to get this right. So with the population looming, with the complexities of transportation, the limited funding opportunities, we just have to have a single vision for how we get around on transit. So I wanted to show you just a really brief video that I think does a good job of introducing what we're going to do in the plan, and then Jason can talk a little bit more detail about how we're getting there.
Our region is made up of 12 counties in North and South Carolina: Anson, Cabarrus, Cleveland, Gaston, Iredell, Lancaster, Lincoln, Mecklenburg, Rowan, Stanley, Union, and York. This area is undergoing robust growth in the
Oop, we lost the sound.
So you saw a kind of a high level schedule on the video, but this schedule goes into a little more detail. Long story short, we will be wrapping up in September of 2021. And you can see from this schedule some of the key components that we'll be talking about through that time. And also just note that you'll see some key dates here, and we have 3 advisory committees, one at the policy level, one that's technical folks for transportation, and then one that includes community members. So those 3 groups meet pretty regularly to talk about the key components of the planning process. And just as a kind of reiteration, we're looking to have one single vision for transit. What happens, outside of Mecklenburg County? How does the system get stretched out? How can we coordinate among all these transit agencies on the big picture items like, mobility hubs between different types of transit, or even on the small issues like how do we best coordinate on issues such as purchasing bus shelters, that procurement process. So it can be the big things and the little things. And then, just how can we make sure that the resources that we're spending are done so in a very coordinated fashion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about the high capacity transit corridors, and then also some of our next steps. Jason?
Great, thank you, Michelle, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. Over the course of my time with CATS back in the early days of 2000, a lot of times when we were going out into public, there was a question of why are you doing this? Why are you doing the Blue Line? Why are you advancing transit in this region? By the time I got to a system update in 2015 for the Southeast and West corridors, it was a question of when are you going to do these things, and why haven't they happened now, and why can't they happen sooner rather than later? And I think that draws an interesting parallel to this regional conversation. 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot of questions around the need for a regional transit plan, but we certainly discovered in our partnership with Centralina, people were not asking the why anymore. They were asking, when are you going to do a regional transit plan? And so as we went through this effort, we've been working on the what is this plan and how are we going to get it done? And the key ways we're going to do that is through these guiding principles that you see in front of your screen today. Because ultimately, this comes down to choice, creating mobility choice. We know congestion is going to come here. That comes with the growth. That shows a successful region. But to prepare for that future growth, we need mobility choice. And we have to advance equity at the same time. We must align local plans and visions, because although a regional plan, it must be developed locally. And then ultimately, that last piece, how do we get it done? What is that path to implementation? So this is just not a study, but as a plan of action in order to deliver a regional transit system. So as we set out to think about a regional system across 12 counties, we blurred our eyes a bit and not paid attention to the boundaries that were between us, but rather the corridors that connect us. And we came up with a couple of draft set of candidate corridors that could be either for bus service, regional express bus service, high capacity transit like light rail, commuter rail, and bus rapid transit. And it was building off upon the 2030 transit system plan here in Mecklenburg County. So the Red Line commuter rail up the Norfolk Southern corridor through the towns of Huntersville, Cornelius, Davison, and Mooresville and Cornelius. The I-77 bus rapid transit project that we want to do in the express lanes connecting Charlotte to Mooresville. The Link Silver Line that will connect 3 counties from the city of Belmont and Gaston County through Charlotte to Matthews, and proposal into Indian Trail and Stallings in Union County. And of course, the current Blue Line, and building off of that potential project into Cabarrus County and the further extension into Ballantyne. Those were our starting points. And the corridors that you see there are extensions of that and some new corridors: Albemarle Road, the Brookshire Freeway, Highway 16, South Tryon, Highway 74, the corridors that you would think about when you're thinking about where could you put high capacity transit. But it was also important in this layer to look at freight corridors. Where could we potentially put passenger rail, and looking at all the freight corridors within the region to where that could be a real reality. And we included that in our initial set. So as we look through that initial set on the next slide, we started taking that through, how do we create this mobility choice? And one way to understand mobility choice is to look at trip patterns. And what are the trip patterns in this region? How are people moving and flowing? Michelle talked about earlier about how much flow there is between each county. And we looked at the regional travel demand model that we use for air quality and many other uses to understand the flows between different areas within the region. And of course, there's a big draw to areas in Charlotte, but there's a lot of draw between areas, say in Union County over to Ballantyne, and then South Carolina to Ballantyne, and places from the Cabarrus County area over into the University of Research Park. So a lot of different synergies occurring, and we use those to help us understand a kind of a regional pattern of movement. And I think on the next piece, there's this animation where these patterns started to emerge. And this was a growing pattern that we saw that we used to help us develop all these corridors. And then, how do we prepare for future growth? We know growth is coming here. Charlotte uses a term a lot that 400,000 people are going to be moving to the city of Charlotte over the next 20 years. And people ask me, well, what does that look like? What does that mean? It's like, all you got to do is look what already has happened in the past 20 years and just think about that happening again. And if what's showing here on the map, if we look at the density change over the next 20 years throughout the region, you can see where there's going to be increased density, not only in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, but in key places like Rock Hill and Monroe, and the big jumps in Cabarrus County, Statesville and Mooresville and Gastonia and Shelby. So the density is not just going to occur within Mecklenburg, but throughout this region. And then once again, there's that pattern of these corridors that started to show up. And so as we think about the pieces that maybe we weren't as focused on 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, but how do we advance equity? How do we create mobility, not only to move people from place to place, but to increase mobility for somebody's place in life so that they have access to education and access to employment. And so we looked at all the different populations within our region and came up with what we call a transit propensity index, where we could look at minority, low income, educational attainment, senior citizen populations and better populations, and see where those concentrations exist. And then once again, the same patterns start to emerge along these key corridors throughout our region. And then how do we land plans with local visions? If you think about the big projects that are happening throughout this region, think about what's happened in Kannapolis and everything that's happened there with the former Camden Mill site. That's now a research facility. And then you have what's happening in Gastonia with the Fuse District, with a new baseball stadium, a new entertainment complex, and many others throughout the region. How do we align this transit plan with those? And so we took our initial draft set of candidate corridors out to the community and to stakeholders. And those dark blue lines there represent new ideas. And those blue dots represent areas and locations that were key for serving. And so we take those ideas and to help us understand what would be our initial recommendations of corridors. And then ultimately, our last guiding principle, and probably the most important one, is how do we get this thing done? How do we think about funding across multiple counties, across 2 states? How do we make sure we position this community to keep momentum going so that we can build a regional transit system through our federal and state partnerships? Because that's how we did it the first time, because it starts with a vision, the Centers and Corridors vision in the mid-90s in Charlotte-Mecklenburg area that led to a 2025 transit land use vision, that led to a referendum in 1998 where the voters approved a 50-cent sales tax, which has led to the implementation of the Lynx Blue Line, the Blue Line extension, and all the bus improvements that we've done in Mecklenburg County started with that vision. But we're not alone in that. The days of us competing with areas within our own circle, we're competing on a regional scale with other regions across the nation, and successful regions are advancing multimodal rapid transit and mobility plans. Austin just passed a property tax actually to fund their Project Connect. Atlanta has created a governance model to help them with funding and coordination between all the different transit agencies. Denver advanced 5 rapid transit corridor projects all at the same time. And Nashville had a comprehensive regional transit plan, and for many reasons that did not sit well with the voters, and it was not passed when it was put up for a vote. However, they are taking a step back and rethinking that plan. We as a region, these are our competitors, and these are the people that the regional plans that we have learned from are folding that into our effort as well. So how do we build out our plan, this regional transit plan? It's going to be made up of multiple components with the high capacity transit and mobility corridors that you see in front of you now. Those original drafts that have candidate corridors you saw, we took those and put those in different tiers. Some of those corridors are more suited for, say, regional express or bus connections to mobility hubs and park and rides and transit centers. Those are the light green lines you see there. But the darker lines are what we see as the true opportunities for high capacity transit, for future light rail projects, for bus rapid transit, regional express bus, future commuter rail. Imagine an opportunity for regional commuter rail from Salisbury all the way to Kings Mountain that comes to a station in uptown Charlotte called the Charlotte Gateway Station, our first true regional train station that will be in uptown in 2025. And we're seeking ways to capitalize on those opportunities by putting the vision in place. But all of that I just showed you that map, if you break it down, this is what its true components are. High capacity transit corridors and mobility corridors throughout the region that are light rail, bus rapid transit, commuter rail, and enhanced bus solutions and mobility solutions. And then through this study, we will come up strategic actions to make sure that happens. And that's what's listed there on the screen in front of you now. And on the next slide, we'll also, go back to all the patterns that we showed before. You can see how those high capacity corridors truly line up with all the analysis and the patterns that we did through our guiding principle evaluation. But that's not all what all the plan's about. And of course, high capacity transit is what gets people excited about these rapid transit plans. But the bread and butter and the real meat of any transit system is the bus system and all the connecting pieces that come with that. And so with that, we're looking at integrated bus service strategies and also looking at all the other areas that are identified on that map for the rural to urban connection, human services type of service between hospitals and paratransit services. And how do we make sure that those other areas are also have an opportunity to connect to those high capacity transit corridors. And then I'll close out with a couple of slides here. I mean, ultimately, everything that you just seen will be wrapped up somewhere around in September of this year, but it needs to be adopted. It needs to go through the proper places to make sure that it's in the metropolitan planning organizations, transportation planning organizations, adopted plans. It needs to be in each of the affected and impacted and possibly opportunities within jurisdictions within this 12 county region, getting it in front of the local and state agencies, and putting it in front of the Metropolitan Transit Commission. That is the governing body of CATS, made up of all the mayors of Mecklenburg County. I think CATS will be a big part of how this plan will be completed. And how do we better partner with all of our MPO partners across the region? And then of course, putting it in front of the Centralina Regional Council to continue this work as a part of their body of work. So what's next? We have an upcoming Transit Academy. We think that'd be a great opportunity to learn from key stakeholders and individuals about all the things that we're doing, but also what it means to operate a bus system. How do we do these things across county lines? We're looking at integrated bus service strategies with all the fixed route providers within our region, and transportation demand management. How do we come up with strategies to reduce single occupancy vehicle usage through either pass sales or working with the development community to incorporate transit supportive land uses? And what are all those emerging trends and technologies? How do we make our system future ready, knowing that we're changing very rapidly? How do we create mobility hubs and think differently about our parking rides that perform more function than just storing and parking cars, but they also are a place where you can catch multiple modes, say rideshare services, scooter share, bike share, car share, all the things that are happening. How do we future ready ourselves so that we're ready for what's to come? And I think with that, that's Michelle and I's final slides, and we are happy to take any questions.
Let me start off. Thank you for that briefing. That's very helpful. Let me start off and ask both of you how you think the pandemic, the COVID-19 experience from the past year, and all we've learned about automated vehicles coming in the future, how that's going to affect the planning that's in place today.
Well, I'll just start out by saying, one of the questions we do receive quite often is, hey, there's not a lot of traffic out there now, and is that ever going to, be like it was, and people are just going to work from home. And really, it's kind of why I put the 2 slides at the beginning that really talked about our region, our economy, the types of products and goods that we need to move around, and how important that is, and therefore how important it is to have multiple modes of transportation to get people around, not just a single occupancy vehicle. The other thing I think will come out of this is through the pandemic, the transit organizations actually have been required to peer network so much more, learning from one another, how to keep the buses clean, how to, are they providing hazard pay to their employees? Just all the little details that they're working through with the CARES Act funds. They have really developed even a higher level of partnership through this process. And I'll also say that even though we haven't gotten there yet, a key component of this project scope is to look at emerging transportation technologies. It does no good for us to, imagine a transit system that uses the vehicles and the technologies that have been used for the past 100 years, which is one of the reasons why we thought it highly important to look at high capacity transit corridors. We're not saying if it's commuter rail or light rail or bus rapid transit, it could be autonomous vehicles, it could be, helicopters, whatever. But we know in the future that those key corridors are critical to the communities along the corridor in terms of moving goods, products, and people. So it's a bit timeless in that way that we pulled together those particular corridors. So Jason, do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I would just say, I think what we learned as a transit provider, the first thing was that there were still people that needed transit services. The world didn't stop for a lot of people who needed to get to work for essential services and essential jobs. And so, we see transit as still as an important piece of the fabric of our community. And we feel that, the peak has changed somewhat. The peak of how people travel may change once people start coming back to work. But I do think that from our standpoint, transit is just as important as the roads that they're traveling on or the right of way that they're in. And then, that's still going to be an important piece. And as far as, how technologies will change, I think it's important, no matter what the mode is, as Michelle says, we still need the space to do that effectively. So be it an autonomous bus in its own right of way, from a planning standpoint, that doesn't really change what we're talking about here, because we still need that right of way and protect that right of way and have transit supportive strategies. And what is the purpose of transit into the future? I think that, to me, if you think about some of the great places that we have in our community, the great places that exist, in some ways started out around a walkable, place-based kind of community. And transit still has unparalleled with that ability to create those kinds of places.
I just wanted to build on that last point that Jason made. If you think about the history of growth in communities, great cities and communities have grown up around, transportation. So around the waterways, of course, around the railroads in this Piedmont region. And, transit is really that next piece. Our regional transit system is where communities will grow, where they will get more dense, where jobs will focus. So this is an important piece of our infrastructure investment over the next decades.
Steve Posson has a question. Steve, why don't you unmute and ask it directly?
Sure. I'm just, wondering if electric powered busing is, being factored into the routes. I know busing in itself is a sort of a fast answer on transit programs, but, electric busing is kind of a new wave.
Sure. Yeah. And I can provide some detail on that. And actually, one of our transit agencies that we mentioned, the 17 within our region, is fully electric. My Ride in Rock Hill has a system that they started, I want to say a few years ago, fully electric system. Cats actually is working in partnership with Duke Energy to fully electrify our fleet. And so that will start with a pilot program, hopefully later this year, first of next, where we'll be testing some electric bus providers, up to 3 different ones, and mixing them throughout our fleet to test the different conditions. But it is CAT's goal and intent to fully electrify our fleet over the coming years in partnership with Duke Energy. So I think it is not expressly a part of the regional transit plan. It doesn't preclude it, but there are some things that are happening on the ground right now with CATs and other transit agencies throughout the region.
Thank you. I didn't know that about Rock Hill. Thank you.
It should be noted that the CLT Airport has purchased,
That's
I
right.
believe it's 10 electric buses that they'll be instituting for their transportation network around the airport. It'll start within the next 2 years. So that's something else to look forward to. There are other questions out there?
I've got a question. This is Mike Babbitt, Bank of America.
Thanks, Mike.
So obviously everybody on the phone here is interested in how this is going to impact them and their commute or how they interact with transportation. And I'm no exception to that. I live up north of town and noticed the red line is scheduled for the 2030 plan. Does that mean it'll be done by 2030, or is that just kind of the general target date? What's any ideas on when those will actually be built out?
Sure. So it certainly is our goal to build out the 2030 transit system plan by 2030. And then, that would include the Lynx Silver Line, the Lynx Red Line, the commuter rail you just mentioned, an extension to Ballantyne, a southern extension of the Blue Line to Pineville and Ballantyne, and the I-77 BRT project. Specifically about the Red Line, so much of that is really dependent upon an agreement that we can reach with the railroads. They own, Norfolk Southern owns that corridor. At this point, their policy is not to allow passenger rail on that corridor. They did not used to be so strict in that corridor early in CAT's being in the early 2000s, but around 2011 or so, they had a change in heart and leadership to that access to that corridor. So until we have access to that corridor, that is the true limitation for us implementing that project.
Okay, thank you.
But I will say, just if I could plug the other project that's in that corridor. So we know, we did a system update a few years ago, and what we heard from the community was, certainly a strong desire for the commuter rail. That was heard loud and clear of the location of that project. But what we also heard was a need for fast and convenient, reliable, all day, nights and weekends level of service, which you're not really not able to achieve that through a commuter rail project that primarily operates in your morning and afternoon. And so with the express lanes coming online in 77 and direct connects, and we already have 4 park and rides in that corridor and another one coming at Hambright in I-77, we're looking into an I-77 bus rapid transit project that would provide all day service, peak service directly from each park and ride, nights and weekends as well. And that is a project that we're advancing currently in the planning phase and looking for ways to deliver that project.
I think what's important in this analysis and this investigation is that we look at the number of years that are involved from the point at which you start this planning to the point at which these plans are implemented and in place. And certainly Charlotte, the city of Charlotte gets a lot of credit for stepping out with the 22 miles of light rail transit that are already in place from 485 all the way to the university, from Pineville out to the university. And that's major. What's happened along that corridor, at least the first half of that corridor, was that the property values along South Boulevard have increased. In 1980, the total property values was somewhere in the $280,000 amount, and it's now well over $2.8 billion. Now, of course, that's a windfall of revenues to the city, but it also accommodates the growth in the population that's taken place and offsets some of the traffic that would have been in those corridors. that same kind of development is going to take place between the city and the university, and it's to be expected. What's nice about that is that now the surrounding counties have seen that in place and see the value of bringing the light rail across the county line into their counties. Gaston County is quite excited about it. I expect Jason and Michelle can talk a lot about that. But there are also overtures from Union County in expectation that it'll cross the county line and move into Stallings at the very least. I've spoken with the mayor of Concord. Mayor Douche wants to see it, the rail go across 485 out to the Speedway and into the city of Concord at some point, and possibly out to the Research Institute. Could you folks, Michelle and Jason, speak about those avenues, those corridors?
Well, I'll just say that when we spent the 2 years going around and talking and engaging with folks from all around the region, it was so interesting to hear their excitement and passion about different types of transportation. And I think you're exactly right, John. They saw the what was happening, not on the light rail, but they also understand that they probably are going to, in at least some corridors, need to build up to that. So they're going to need to build some density around these corridors to provide the ridership needed to actually fund transit investments. So they're looking at that, they're noticing it, they're understanding it, they're thinking about changing their land use plans, and that will be part of this process as well, is to really provide some guidance on, if these are your high capacity transit corridors, here's what you need to be doing to make sure that you get the places where they need to be so that transit can actually be successful.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, that's a great point, Michelle. I think that we call it the 2030 Transit System Plan, but its first name in 1998 was the 2025 Transit and Land Use Plan. We maybe we just assumed that land use was we could drop it, but land use and transit are intricately linked to be successful. And so Michelle's absolutely right. Thinking about the land use around those corridors, and to that effect, Gastonia and the city of Belmont partnered with CATS as well as Indian Trail and Stallings and Matthews and Charlotte to do a transit-oriented development study along the entire 74 corridor. Although, for right now, CATS is doing design work to get us to the city of Belmont for the Link Silver Line Light Rail project, but those other 10 miles are a part of that TOD study to look at the type of nodes that could support transit or what would need to change from a policy standpoint to help with that. And then I think one of the key pieces that we see as momentum coming out of this effort is taking those corridors to the next level and thinking about the Highway 29 corridor into Concord, or the potential commuter rail corridor, passenger rail connecting Salisbury to Charlotte and Charlotte to Kings Mountain. Same thing for 74. So I think that, Michelle's absolutely right. Looking at how you build up policy, it's all not as exciting as talking about light rail, but that's how you get it, is prepping, priming the pump for the future.
Well, and that's where vision comes into this in a really big way. And that's where the expectation of this as support for the growth of economic development. Right now, the nexus for all of these lines is still the center city of Charlotte. That's the primary hub. But when you examine these other mobility systems like Austin and Atlanta and Nashville and Denver and others that are out there, they've even created other hubs through which the spokes converge. And we really ought to be looking at the fact that the density of the population primarily is east of the Catawba River. And that's where most of the infrastructure is currently in place. But where's the most available land at the least cost? And that's probably west of the river and offers huge opportunities. There's a company called MXD Development that did a study for our airport and has followed that study up with a study for Gaston County. And they really look at the advantages of being in Gaston County and having such immediate access to CLT Airport. The opportunities for business growth and development across the river will be enhanced when either we add another bridge to get people to and from Gaston County, or we add any kind of development that might bring the light rail across the river. Right now, the bottleneck is at 85 and 485, and it's a real problem spot. When 85 jams, there's not much place to go to get into town. We certainly know the bottlenecks that have been on I-77 North. There's another factor here, and it's learning how states learn to work together. South Carolina has focused its economic development along I-26 from Charleston through Columbia to Greenville. That's where most of their business growth and development have taken place. Bobby Hitt, their commerce director, has been very focused on that. He realizes that I-77 from Columbia to Charlotte is an important corridor, but it needs some of the important essentials like sewer and power and water that would support business along that rung of I-77. I think what I wish were happening would be for the region to be doing some more visioning exercises where they would think about how we solve some of the problems. Our city knows that it's facing a problem with housing for people who want to move here. Well, the immediate opportunities for lesser cost housing is across the river. And that gives us a chance to look again at some of those other regions. There's a governing article from Governing Magazine that looked at Atlanta 20 years ago when the city of Atlanta was battling with the counties around them about the issues confronting them about crime and housing and transportation, and how they have advanced their concern for those problems into a broader regional concern. They now have more of the same concerns in common, and they're working in a coordinated fashion to bring them together. It would be my hope that Charlotte might learn from some of those experiences and find ways to take the leap forward to bring counties into some of the decision-making processes that address some of those problems. As that 2.5 million people move into the city, there are real opportunities for the neighboring counties to participate in more of those challenges and offer solutions that are not going to be available to the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County all by themselves. Can you guys speak to that at all from the regional perspective? Mike's got a hand up. Let's bring Mike into the conversation.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I got a few minutes, and I kind of wanted to hear just quickly, time and terminology, really important. Kind of wanted to hear what Don Upton had to say about this because we've had discussions about this fairly regularly. But time, these plans, and I'm a big transit proponent, but it takes time. And I'm afraid the technology is not going to give us the time. One of the things I cite is hydrogen, for instance. We've been hearing about hydrogen for years and years and years. It's real. It's in Europe. It's in Japan. It's on the West Coast. And, the issue becomes how do you roll these plans out in a timely fashion so that we can actually get the economies of scale out of the current technology, but also anticipate the future. I'd love for Don Upton to just give us a quick snapshot of his thought on that. And I wanted to say that even though he has tried to disguise himself as Brian Rubens, that is Wayne Cooper down there. I could only see his eyes, but yeah, that's him. That's what I thought. Sorry, John.
No problem. Don, did you want to add some comments after his?
Well, only because my good friend prompted me, but I'll just keep it short. But I'll put it in the form of a question. in terms of the insights of the professionals that are here. My teams work on transportation strategies and funding on large regional basis. So just three questions. One would be your thoughts about addressing my opinion, the fact that some of the cities you're highlighting as competitors, such as Austin and Nashville, are already too late. And is that an incentive for us? Nashville, in my opinion, their economy is going to flatten and begin to fail in certain ways, and Austin too, because they're so late. The second is, do you think we're going to face any snapback as we move forward, as the politics of funding gets hotter and hotter, often unreasonable? I'm sitting in my office in a county right now in Florida. The Supreme Court just overturned a 1% sales tax for transit, and now they have to give back $500 million. And so there's a lot of strange politics in here about rights and funding. And then the final thing on vision, I'm wondering if you're seeing any opportunities for vision work that is truly proactive, and where we can distinguish ourselves as Charlotteans, as the Charlotte region of the Carolinas. You used Atlanta. Many of these places that we're highlighting today took action because of great pain. Atlanta is a region because it flunked the Clean Air Act, not because they had vision. And I'm wondering, are you seeing opportunities for us as Charlotte region of the Carolinas and all these counties to get ahead? So I'm turning, those are perspectives, Mike, to answer your question, but I want to hear what the professionals think about those things.
Well, I would just say, if you look at our competitors that were highlighted, you know, Austin, Nashville, we know from some of the look back that one of the criticisms in Nashville was that they were looking at a too small of an area. You know, the geography was not really thinking through kind of all of the needs. And frankly, I don't know if that could not be said when you're looking at 2 states and 12 counties. So even though it was a tremendous, you know, it could be seen as a tremendous barrier to try to be that inclusive, we just felt like when looking at the economic region around Charlotte, that we had to go into South Carolina. We had to extend west out to Cleveland and east out to Anson County, even though they're not necessarily at the ends feeling the pain points yet. But we want to be prepared so that as we start approaching that there's a plan of action in place that there's consensus on. So I know our time is short. So JL, do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that you said that very well. I mean, I think that this effort, and I'll try to answer John and others along in the same kind of vein. I mean, this effort is that visioning piece. We are trying to get ahead of the curve on this. When you look at Gaston County and Cleveland County and Lincoln County, there's a lot of available land in those places. You know, we're going to run out of land in Mecklenburg County at some point, and unless we truly densify, that we will go across the county. In some regions, you know, 30 and 40 and 50 miles out from your city center is not that far away. Today, that seems like that's really far away, maybe, you know, Wadesboro. But in 20 years, Wadesboro may not feel that far away as far as we've grown as a region. So this is intended to build that framework that we can build upon. And to the answer to the questions of, you know, different kinds of propulsion for hydrogen or electric, whatever it may be, at the end of the day, setting the corridors is the most important piece, no matter what the mode is, what the propulsion is. And so we can build and develop along those corridors. That's the most important piece. So this is an effort to try to get ahead of that, because we know it's coming. The tide is coming this way. You know, it's like your neighbor's tree falls on it, and what do? You're looking at your house and see, are there any dead limbs over my house? And then you start cutting trees around here. So we want to try to prevent some of that now and get ahead of the curve on that. That is the underlying purpose for what we're doing.
Thank you very much. I promised Jason he had another meeting coming up that we would end promptly at 3. We're at 3:01. I want to thank both Michelle and Jason for giving up time today to educate us about this regional mobility system. You can see it's very exciting, but you can also imagine how attractive it may be to companies that consider moving to this region to expand their connection with the U.S. economy. We've had a lot of foreign direct investment that's come this way, and I don't think that investment has ended. Projects like this are going to make it even more likely that we'll attract even more investment. Thank you. If the rest of you will hang around, I'd like some of you to get to know each other. If you've got a few minutes, we don't have to stay all 30 minutes, but just so people can talk to each other. Thanks to Michelle and Jason. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. I'd like Steve Genoway to introduce himself first. He's new to the region. He's working with Don. Go ahead, Steve. Tell us about yourself.
Hi there. I'm also being interrupted by a 6-year-old, so you'll see me shooing her along.
Ah, hello there.
Thank you. We made it. You did make it. Can you go on?
And look, this is how it looks like when it's done.
Come on.
I made these.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a sweetheart.
So, sign of the times. I appreciate that. But yes, I'm Steve Genoway. I've been working for about a decade in management consulting, economic development, grant making and writing, as well as local economic development support, and for a regional planning commission at one point. My issue areas match those of new systems ethics, so that's kind of serendipitous. But I started my career as a social worker, and so hitting the center of my bullseye on issues like access for transportation, for broadband, for wealth generation for individual families is very near and dear to my heart.
Thanks, Steve. Mike Babbitt, how about telling us about you? Mike is stepping in where Will Manning served with the Carolina World Trade Association. Mike, tell us about you.
So happy to introduce myself. I've been with Bank of America for 12 years. I'm in their international trade division. So specifically, if we have clients that come to our bankers across the country with questions about international trade, I'm one of the people that those bankers will call to bring in to talk to them about all kinds of different banking products related to international trade. I've been here in the Charlotte area for that amount of time as well, 12 years. Before that, I was in Indiana getting my graduate degree. And before that, I was selling banking products internationally to banks outside the US, specifically Latin America and Mexico. But yeah,
another Hoosier.
Well, I was at Purdue, so not technically a Hoosier.
Too bad.
But glad to be here.
Thank you. Dana, how about introducing yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Dana Hicks is my name, resident of Huntersville, lived here in the area for almost 30 years. Through the last 20 years, I've worked for area manufacturers as CEO of Huber Technology, as Director of North American Sales for Wedeco UV Technologies. I've been involved with CWTA, with North Carolina District Export Council, and other international organizations, and that's really sort of the common thread that brings me to a meeting like this. Not to mention the fact that living in Huntersville, I am very personally interested in whether we will finally advance the Red Line project, and thinking broadly more in economic development terms, what that would mean to Huntersville, Cornelius, Davidson, Mooresville, all the way up to Statesville.
Absolutely. Thank you. Steve Posson, introduce yourself to everybody.
Okay, greetings from Pinehurst, where I've lived since August 1st. North Carolina World Trade Association is one of my hats, and then I'm also in international logistics. But I do appreciate the chance to listen in on CWTA and learn more about the greater Charlotte area, because I've been in the Triangle for 23 years until I moved to Central Carolina. And so, you know, this is all new territory for me, and I'm excited to learn, you know, your 12 counties and who's who in the pew. And I look forward to growing more with what you're doing here. So thank you.
How about Mr. Brott from the North Carolina ports?
Yes, good afternoon. I do apologize that my camera is not working today, but my name is Aaron Brott, Senior Director of Key Clients and Trade Development at North Carolina Ports. Really appreciate the opportunity to learn more about the Charlotte area, especially around the transit system, as well as how we can better support that the western part of North Carolina as North Carolina Ports. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And Brian Rubens or Wayne Cooper, whoever he claims to be today.
Well, I thought that if I put Brian Rubens' name on there, nobody would recognize me. You know? And that way I could say what I wanted to say. Wayne Cooper, really a has-been at this stage in life, and I am still chairman of the World Affairs Council, and that organization does a great job. And been involved in international trade almost all my life, and been the Mexican honorary consul of Mexico for the last 40, coming up next month, 40 years. So as Mike Hawley used to say, I'm the oldest rat in the barn. So that's it.
Well,
enjoy the program today very much.
Awfully happy to have all of you here today. And what's lacking, it's important for people to realize in the last 3 years, we've lost the Charlotte Regional Partnership. We've lost the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce. While the Charlotte Chamber renamed itself the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, we haven't seen the evidence that they really can represent the region well on issues like this one. They've recently hired in the last month a woman from the Chicago area that was involved in tri-state regional representation from Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And she may be the right person to bring some leadership from the Regional Business Alliance to the region of Charlotte. But in the absence of those groups right now, there's an opportunity for the Carolina World Trade Association to step up and participate in some of these discussions. And I think that's important because we want to make this a valuable place to do business. It's been a gateway to the US economy for a long time, and we hope it will be a gateway to the future of the US economy, both inbound and outbound from an international trade perspective. We are going to re-energize this organization as people exit the pandemic and everybody gets their shots. We hope to meet together again face to face, possibly in May. We'll see how things work out, but we'll continue to do virtual webinars. We're going to be expanding them this year. We're going to do some virtual webinars and connect people with countries like Germany. We've got a great friend over there in Vanessa Goschel, who represents South Carolina in Frankfurt. And she will put on a program for us to educate us about how to do business in Germany. We can visit other countries with other representatives. I'm sure Wayne can help us make a connection with Mexico and learn more about how to do business across that border. There are real opportunities here with virtual meeting that allows us to visit those locations more easily, and we want to put those in place. The other thing we'd like to do, and Aaron Brott, you can be the first one on the list, we want to do a virtual tour of the North Carolina ports. And I suspect you have a virtual tour maybe in your files there that you could pull out and use for a meeting of the Carolina World Trade. We'd like very much to make that happen and then follow that with Charleston and Savannah so that people get connected with the 3 ports that are nearest to us. I'm sure Aaron can make the best deal for any one of us, but I'll leave that work to him. Aside from that, I want to thank you all for participating. Does anybody have any other comments or concerns they'd like to put forward?
Just want to thank you for putting on the program, John.
Hearing none, we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care.